Tell you that. Sammy Davis has a gorgeous home. I went out and visited him. The landscaping, the shrubbery and the trees. See, I come from Philadelphia, and I lived in row houses. We never saw that, shrubbery and trees. So if ever, the good Lord willing, I ever become a star, and I move to California, I'm going to get a home with lots of trees, because I realize now that a house without a tree ain't fit for a dog.
Joey Bishop finally came clean about the Rat Pack's sinister nature in his final day. Although he was their star comedian, there was a serious problem going on behind the scene. Frank Sinatra's treachery, the multi-million-dollar offers he rejected, and the startling explanation for his exclusion from Hollywood fame. America's favorite comedy troupe attempted to conceal this story. Joseph Abraham Gottlieb was born Joey Bishop in the Bronx, New York on February 3, 1918. He came from a Jewish immigrant household and was the youngest of 5 children. His family supported his artistic endeavors. They witnessed his ability to command attention with ease. He wasn't ostentatious or noisy. Despite their mutual respect, they lacked a strong emotional bond. Larry has talked about how his father influenced his work, but their connection was never friendly. It was always professional. Bishop was known for being witty and perceptive, but he stood out from the others in the Rat Pack for another reason. He didn't use drugs or alcohol. Bishop remained away from the crazy nights that Sinatra, Martin, and Davis Jr. were renowned for. Being aware of how easily celebrity may lead to self-destruction, he preferred to maintain his composure. Being superior to others wasn't the goal. All he wanted was control. His pals valued that aspect of it. Bishop was the one who remained grounded, even as the festivities continued into the early morning. After Sylvia's passing, everything was different. She had served as his compass and his link to the outside world of Hollywood. He retreated without her. He rarely interacted and appeared in public less frequently. Losing Sylvia made his already deteriorating health worse. His Newport beach house became a haven for him, a peaceful haven away from the thrills of his former life. There was a story behind that house. Bishop and Sylvia encountered a violent hurricane when sailing back from Mexico in the late 1970s. Waves were 16 feet high and winds reached 60 mph. They finally docked at Newport Beach's Balboa Bay Club, barely making it to safety. Soon after, they made the decision to purchase a home on Lido Isle, since that moment stayed with them. It turned to become a haven where people could get away from the mayhem of Hollywood. Despite being the final Rat Pack member to survive, Joey Bishop never felt like an equal. While the others sang and performed, he was the comedian who kept the audience laughing. In an indication that he was important, Sinatra once referred to him as the hub of the huge wheel. However, Bishop never thought that was how the group really perceived him. For years, he had the belief that he was the most underappreciated member. There was something that disturbed him every time he read a book about the Rat Pack. Sometimes, his name was even less visible than Peter Lawford. It was difficult to accept. He had a delicate, almost natural sense of humor. He had a manner of telling a joke while maintaining a straight face, which added to its humor. Later on, same look would distinguish him in the entertainment industry. It was made worse by a piece written by columnist Earl Wilson. It asserted that Bishop was treated like a visitor in the group and only interacted with Sinatra when invited. Bishop was wiser. He knew where he belonged. Although he wasn't the leader, he played a significant role in the success of their performances. He wasn't there because Sinatra was helping him. He was there because he belonged. Despite his frustrations, Bishop never became hostile toward Sinatra. He held him in high regard. He liked reminding people that honesty was the most important thing to Sinatra. A young woman who wished to meet Sinatra was the subject of one of Bishop's favorite anecdotes. Sinatra made sure she had the opportunity rather than dismissing her. He showed her respect and kindness. Bishop wanted people to see the real Sinatra, just the crazy, exaggerated version they thought they knew, so he recounted stories like that. For Bishop, loyalty was everything. For this reason, Sinatra declined to publish a book that would reveal everything after his death. He rejected every offer of millions of dollars from publishers to divulge personal information. It was a betrayal to him. Just because the world craved gossip didn't mean he was going to sell away what the Rat Pack had created. Bishop also detested the way their legacy had been misrepresented over time. The drinking, the partying, and the scandals were the main topics of conversation. They disregarded the Rat Pack's actual influence. Entertainment was altered by them. They stood up for equality of race. The Rat Pack refused to perform until hotels in Las Vegas allowed Sammy Davis Jr. to stay because he was black. Bishop wanted people to remember stories like that. There were highs and lows in his own career. His late-night chat program did not do well, but he was the star of the Joey Bishop program, which ran for 4 years. Late-night television was dominated by Johnny Carson, and his staff ensured that well-known visitors avoided Bishop's show. There wasn't much he could do, but that hurt his chances. There were moments when he felt forgotten, even amid the Rat Pack. Though it wasn't easy to get started, Joey wanted to take comedy seriously. Seeking any opportunity to perform, he entered amateur competition. He received $3 for mimicking radio comics in a local contest in 1936. It wasn't always apparent that he was the one who added humor to their performance. He was simply viewed by some as an extra who was fortunate to be present. He never liked that impression, yet he was proud of his accomplishments in spite of his difficulties. No one could take away from him the fact that he had made people laugh all his life. His health was deteriorating by 2005. He lost his sense of direction during one of his final interviews. At the age of 89, he died on October 17, 2007, 2 years later. The original Rat Pack came to an end with his passing. Bishop left behind a complex legacy. Despite being a member of one of the most illustrious performing groups in history, he frequently felt undervalued. However, he never allowed resentment to define him. He refused to forsake his friend, remained loyal to his ideas, and maintained the conviction that their joint creation was still important. He knew he had contributed to something amazing, even if the world didn't always give him the recognition he deserved, and that was plenty in the end. Though it wasn't much, he was persuaded that he had something unique. Vaudeville was where he got his first significant break. The Bishop Trio was the name of the comedy group he and his brother Maury founded. Glenn Bishop, their driver, gave them the name. They then changed their name to the Bishop Brothers when new artists joined. They gave performances around New Jersey and Pennsylvania in small bars and burlesque houses. It was difficult to perform here. They were boisterous crowds. The salary was minimal. Joey was only better off because he had to battle for attention. He became adept at reading room. Depending on the audience, he modified his gags. Without breaking a beat, he switched to another routine if the first one didn't work. His approach differed from that of the majority of comedians at the time. He didn't use loud jokes or slapstick. He was quiet, yet had a great sense of humor. The audiences adored that. The act was short-lived. One of them was enlisted when World War II broke out. Joey was also called to service shortly after. He enlisted in the US in 1942 Army and joined the Special Services as a sergeant. Jacob, his father, was a bicycle repairman. Anna, his mother, looked after the house. It was easy, but difficult. Comedy remained a part of him even in the military. He maintained morale high by entertaining the troops. He gained a new sense of confidence from performing for his fellow soldiers. Joey Bishop returned to comedy with a renewed sense of purpose following World War II. He had been a member of the Bishop Brothers, a tiny group, prior to the conflict. It was a combination of humor and music, but he had to carry on by himself in 1941 after his partners were drafted. Relying on swift comebacks and a keen sense of humor that would soon distinguish him, he continued to go by his stage name. He quickly returned to the stage after leaving the military in 1945. He began playing in tiny venues, such as New Jersey's Casablanca Roadhouse. Despite the limited audiences, he understood that every performance was an opportunity to get better. The boisterous and raucous humor that was prevalent at the time was not the style of his comedy. He kept things dry and understated rather than using large gestures or outrageous jokes. He spoke in a way that felt intimate, laughed at himself, and found humor in ordinary things. It was successful. Within a few years, he was playing in larger venues such as New York's Latin Quarter and the Greenwich Village Inn. His weekly income of $1,000 was substantial, for a young comedian in the late 1940s. At the same period, the largest platform for performers was television. Bishop seized every opportunity since he knew this was his next move. He began making appearances on variety shows such as The Ed Sullivan Show in 1950. He gained national recognition as a result, but it was when Frank Sinatra entered a club and witnessed him perform that he got his big break. Sinatra happened to be in the audience when Bishop was performing in the Latin Quarter in 1952. Sinatra was drawn to his timing and delivery for some reason. Bishop received an opportunity to open for Bill Miller at his Riviera in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Following the performance, he was soon performing in New York at the Copacabana. These were some of the nation's largest venues. Sinatra was a kingmaker as well as a celebrity. Doors would open if he liked you, and they did for Bishop. He was referred to be Sinatra's comic, but he wasn't merely capitalizing on Sinatra's notoriety. Compared to other comedians, he possessed something unique. His family relocated to South Philadelphia when Joey was 3 months old. His early years were spent in that city, which also influenced the man he would grow up to be. There was life in South Philadelphia. He was never loud or cruel in his humor. He didn't use wild performances or disrespect people. Rather, he ridiculed himself in a way that gave viewers the impression that they were laughing together with him. The way he addressed the audience was one of his greatest ploys. Everything felt personal since he spoke to them as folks. He told stories instead of just jokes. He often made stories about his early years seem more humorous than they actually were. His description of how his family had been so impoverished that he had to use his cousin as a sled during the winter was one of his favorite lines. It was easy, but effective. People found something genuine in it which made them chuckle. In an era when comedy was crowded with well-known figures, Bishop stood out for his ability to engage an audience. He maintained his composure and self-assurance, while others yelled or acted out crazy roles. Even though his career was just getting started, he was already demonstrating that he could garner the largest laughs without being the loudest person in the room. The silent power behind the Rat Pack was Joey Bishop. Behind the scenes, Bishop shaped their humor and maintained the act's sharpness as Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. took center stage. He was the group's comedian, the one who used easy, dry wit to counterbalance their exaggerated personality. His somber demeanor earned him the nickname Frau Prince, but it was his humor that elevated their performances to a memorable level. In the early 1950s, he began his path into the Rat Pack. Sinatra was instantly impressed when he saw him perform in Manhattan's Latin Quarter. Bishop's delivery of humor was effortless and never forced. That pleased Sinatra. His decision to make Bishop his opening act permanently altered Bishop's career. Bishop quickly established himself as a mainstay in Sinatra's world, sharing the stage with the biggest names in Hollywood and singing for sold-out audiences. The Rat Pack reached its zenith by 1960. They were more than just performers. They were a phenomenon of culture. They were famous for their late-night performances at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. The showroom was crowded with people who were excited to watch the combination of comedy, music, and wild actions. The majority of individuals were unaware that Bishop authored a large portion of the content. He created the banter and quips that gave the performances an air of spontaneity. Everyone seemed to have a story. The neighborhoods were close-knit, and the streets were noisy. Joey was raised in a Jewish and Italian neighborhood where jokes were commonplace. People made jokes out of common issues, made fun of one another, and exaggerated their difficulty. He was skilled at bringing out the individuality of each member, giving the impression that everything occurred spontaneously. However, he ensured that everything went without a hitch behind the scenes. Bishop contributed to the group's humor, but he tended to remain in the background. People came to watch Sinatra and Martin because they were the stars. Bishop seemed unconcerned. He was the constant force that prevented everything from going totally awry. Bishop used a well-timed one-liner to revive the performance when the jokes became too wild or it began to lose focus. His humor provided structure to the group, which was difficult to replace, yet easy to ignore. He did more than just perform on stage with the Rat Pack. His humorous timing enhanced the group's camaraderie in movies like Sergeants 3 and Ocean's 11. However, hosting John F. Kennedy's first gala in 1961 was one of the most significant events of his career. This incident demonstrated the power of the Rat Pack, who had been ardent supporters of Kennedy's campaign. It was more than just a show. It was a historical moment. It was Bishop's responsibility to keep the evening flowing while fusing humor with the occasion's sophistication. He did it perfectly. "I told you I'd get you a good seat," he added, glancing at the Kennedys as they arrived. The audience adored it. Even though it was brief, it demonstrated Bishop's significance. He didn't have to work hard to make the nation's most powerful individuals laugh when he stood in front of them. While Joey Bishop and the Rat Pack were having a great time, tension was simmering behind the scenes. In the early 1960s, his once strong relationship with Frank Sinatra began to deteriorate. When Sinatra requested Bishop to cover for him at the Calneva Lodge, a resort that Sinatra partially owned, it was the tipping point. Sinatra anticipated allegiance. He believed Bishop would seize the opportunity. Bishop, however, presented a list of conditions rather than accepting. He desired a private jet and $50,000. This was a slap in the face for Sinatra. Bishop had been assigned to the Rat Pack by him. He had contributed to his fame. He took it all in. He had a natural ability to make others laugh, even as a little child. He began with minor tasks. Bishop was now pretending to be the one helping Sinatra. He was not pleased by that. Loyalty was the foundation of Sinatra's career. He anticipated receiving the same in return. Bishop felt betrayed by his demand. That was it. Sinatra interrupted him. The Rat Pack did not include Bishop. It went beyond simply losing his place in the group. Sinatra ensured that he was excluded from important projects. Bishop had been the initial inspiration for Robin and the Seven Hoods. He was now replaced. It was an obvious message. He was no longer welcome. Bishop took a big hit from this. He already felt like the group's least valuable member. He had gone all outside now. His requests had not gone as planned. He lost everything rather than gaining greater respect. He was resentful of the fallout. He wasn't only upset with Sinatra. He felt irritated with the whole sector. Despite his hard labor, he always seemed to be in the background. Another member of the Rat Pack, Peter Lawford, recognized the emotion. Though different, his difficulties was frustrating. Lawford had a unique position in Hollywood since he was John F. Kennedy's brother-in-law. However, there were issues with that connection as well. His acting career was occasionally overshadowed by his political connections. Even though he and Bishop didn't directly disagree, they both felt alienated. Bishop's rejection only worsened. He mimicked well-known actors like Jimmy Durante and Edward G. Robinson. He picked up instruments like the banjo and mandolin and studied tap dance. He was a natural at performing, but not at school. He was excluded from important occasions. The selection of Johnny Carson to host a significant charity event was among the most agonizing experiences. Bishop might have had the position in the past. They were replacing him now. Without him, the entertainment industry was progressing. Bishop never forgot that sensation. He was rarely candid about what had transpired, but he also didn't keep his annoyance to himself. He mentioned being underappreciated in passing during interview. He detested the way he was depicted in the press. People pretended that he hadn't earned his spot in the Rat Pack, and that he had been fortunate to be one. It hurt. Bishop was unable to escape the past, even years later. His career went on, but he was always characterized by the Rat Pack. He had been involved in a legendary event. They'd forced him out of it too. The wound never completely healed. Joey Bishop managed to maintain her prominence at all times. Despite the ups and downs in his profession, he continued to advance. He starred in The Joey Bishop Show, a sitcom that was partially based on his life. In 1961, he portrayed Joey Barnes, a public relations specialist in Hollywood. He was given the opportunity to show off his humor, but the show's ratings were poor from the beginning. NBC broadcast the first season in black and white. The network changed it to color a year later, which attracted some notice. Sheldon Leonard and Danny Thomas, two of the biggest stars in television at the time, produced one of the first color sitcoms. With Corbett Monica as Joey's best buddy and Abby Dalton as his wife, The cast of the show was impressive. Despite the additional appeal of guest performers like Andy Williams and Jimmy Durante, the show never achieved widespread success. It was discontinued by NBC in 1964. It was picked up by CBS, but they took a chance. The show was revived in black and white. By that time, viewers were accustomed to watching television in color. Due to his inability to stay up in class, he chose to drop out by the time he was 18. He had to work since his family needed money. They barely survived thanks to his father's bicycle repair business. It felt like a mistake to go backward. The ratings kept declining even with well-known guest actors like Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter Lawford. CBS permanently terminated the program a year later. Comedian Vaughn Meador was involved in one of the most peculiar episodes in the show's history. His impersonation of President John F. Kennedy made him famous. He recorded an episode of The Joey Bishop Show on November 15, 1963. Kennedy was slain a week later. The program was never seen again when NBC decided not to telecast it. It is still missing today. Despite its lackluster performance, the show helped make Joey Bishop a well-known television personality. He wasn't finished yet. He faced an even greater struggle in 1960. His own late-night talk show, The Joey Bishop Show, was given to him by ABC. The king of late-night television, Johnny Carson, was his opponent this time. It was a difficult battle to compete with The Tonight Show. Before him, many had tried. The majority had failed. The style of Bishop's show was unusual. It was more conversational and laid back. Regis Philbin got his first significant break on national television when he joined him as his sidekick. The program included musical performances, comedic sketches, and interviews with celebrities. Occasionally, unexpected visitors included Peter Lawford, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, and members of the Rat Pack. Ratings were never high in spite of these attempts. Few viewers wanted to switch because Carson had a devoted following. Bishop, however, had a knack for drawing attention. Something unexpected occurred in July 1968. Live on air, Regis Philbin left the show. He expressed his frustration with the network's criticism and his concern that he was preventing the show from progressing. Audiences were taken aback by the scene, and the story garnered media attention. The truth was later revealed. Joey helped out by taking on various occupations, but his thoughts were constantly focused on something greater. He witnessed the unifying power of laughing. He imitated teachers to make his classmates laugh. Bishop orchestrated the publicity stunt personally. It worked for a moment. People watched, interested in seeing what would happen next. However, the increase in ratings was short-lived. After 2 seasons, ABC cancelled the program in 1969. Bishop continued to be a well-known figure on television after the demise of his late-night show. He resumed his role as a guest host on The Tonight Show, something he had done prior to launching his own program. Bishop was one of the few people who could step in for Carson, who frequently needed them. Joey Bishop felt as though he was falling behind as the 1970s went on. Comedy was evolving quickly. His manner was completely different from that of the new generation of comedians who had taken over. George Carlin and Richard Pryor were at the forefront. They weren't joking around. They were expressing opinions and transforming hardships from everyday life into frank and unvarnished comedy. Pryor was candid about his past, including his difficult upbringing and battles with addiction. His tales were more than just amusing. They had feelings, they were authentic. In contrast, Carlin attacked his surroundings. His incisive observations on society and politics provoked as much thought as laughter. Bishop's career had been based on rapid-fire comebacks and deft wordplay. His sense of humor was ideal for late-night television and nightclubs. Now, though, the look seemed obsolete. The audience was looking for something new. They were looking for comedy that was unconventional. They were looking for humor with a personal touch. Bishop wasn't willing to change and wasn't that kind of comedian. It wasn't just the change in comedy that was hurting him. His relationship with Sinatra had never been solid, and his days with the Rat Pack were over. It was more difficult for him to be relevant without his previous industry relationships. He made fun of his neighbors' eccentricities by observing them. He was unknowingly laying the groundwork for a comedic career. He struggled financially, but his sense of humor never left his house. It was more than a new generation pushing him out. They were forgetting him. Bishop's career had all but vanished by the 1980s. He acted in a few movies, but not many. He had a minor role in Chuck Norris's action movie, The Delta Force, in 1986. Bishop's participation was little acknowledged despite the film's success. He starred in the 1996 movie Mad Dog Time, which was helmed by his son, Larry Bishop. Despite being a personal endeavor, it did not help him regain his fame. There was more to his hiatus from the entertainment industry than a lack of job. Years of disappointments led to it. He had lost influence when he lost the Rat Pack. He was out of touch because he had refused to change. Bishop had not changed and comedy had progressed. Without him, the world that had once praised him had changed. In 1941, Joey Bishop wed Sylvia Rusga. They remained together for 58 years until 1999, when Sylvia died of cancer. Despite Bishop's prolonged absences due to his work, their marriage endured the highs and lows of Hollywood. He performed frequently with Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. as a vital component of the Rat Pack. Any marriage could be strained by such a lifestyle, yet Sylvia supported him. While Bishop toured the nation, she took care of their house, reared their son, and ensured their family remained stable. Trust was the foundation of their relationship. Despite being apart for a long time, they always managed to reconnect. Everything was held together by the quiet power of Sylvia. She managed the demands of celebrity without pursuing personal attention. She was the solid power behind Bishop, even though he was the one in the spotlight. In 1948, Larry, their only son, was born. Despite growing up in Hollywood, he chose to pursue his own career rather than rely on his father's notoriety. After graduating from Beverly Hills High School, he moved on to pursue careers in acting, writing, and directing. He gained recognition for his early parts in movies like The Savage Seven and Wild in the Streets, and he'd later directed movies like Mad Dog Time and Hell Ride. Although he took a similar route, he and Bishop never had a close friendship. Their personal lives suffered as a result of Bishop's frequent absences, whether on stage or working on television.